Hey, Will, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Really good. Good to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. I've been like looking forward to this. It's nice to
Yeah,
finally
me too.
have you on.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited.
Well, I know we have a few topics to cover today. I'm really
Yeah.
excited. I have a feeling this is going to go a little off the rails in a good way. I think we're going to get into some stuff that's
Being the same.
unscripted. That's unscripted. Um,
Yeah.
but before we do that, I want you to introduce yourself, just so our listeners and viewers can find you, follow you. You know, if they like what they're
Sure.
hearing, keep hearing more of it. So introduce
Yeah,
yourself, and then we'll jump in.
sure. Yeah. So, hey, everybody, I am Ashley Phillips. I'm currently, I have an enablement role at a company called Everview. We went through a huge rebrand, so you may not even have known what that name is. Before that, we were Output Services Group, but I've been in enablement for, I don't know, probably about 8 years now. And before that, I spent a good 7 solid years in teaching, like traditional public school, like classroom teachers.
Ooh,
That's what I,
me
that's what I
too.
did. Yeah. Oh gosh, we
Yeah.
got to talk. I'm like
Yeah,
writing a
we'll talk
book
about
about
it.
it if I can ever like get up and
Yeah.
going. Yes, I love it.
Wow,
It's one of my
crazy.
favorite topics.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I've been out of college for about 15 years now, and I'm about equal time now, leaning more towards enablement and L&D. But I love everything enablement. I think one of my favorite parts about it is the like the connectivity of it all. Like you do sit in the action, and I personally, like, I'm a competitor, so that whole being in revenue and where the action is and using the assets around you to perform the best you can, like I can't get enough of that. So it's a good personality fit for me, I'll say. But yeah, you'll get to know me. I'd like to talk about a lot of things.
I love that. I love that. By the way, we are going to talk about the teaching thing. We can park and let that. But yeah,
You're already
that's
off
what I
the
studied.
rails.
That's what I studied in college. I did it for a year,
Yeah,
and in that year, knew that I wasn't going to do it anymore. I taught
you
high
should
school.
definitely talk.
Taught high school. It was brutal, and then ended up in sales. So
Yeah.
here we are. Yeah, we could talk about that a lot. Well, awesome. Well, I'm so glad to have you on. This is going to be sweet. Uh, Really, obviously, the reason we're doing this series is times are a little crazy. Obviously, a lot of
Yeah.
organizations are going through reduction in forces, and we're seeing a lot of the staff that are being affected by these reduction in forces. A lot of like support staff, and for whatever reason, I actually did a session a couple days ago with someone who described this perfectly. But for whatever reason, enablement oftentimes gets thrown into support staff. It's
Uh-huh.
probably not and shouldn't be viewed that way. It should be viewed as more of a strategic role, obviously tied to revenue. But I think a lot of C-level leadership looks at enablement in more of a support function today. I think hopefully that'll change in the future. But so what we want to do is provide a space for individuals like yourself who are very experienced in enablement, who've been doing this for a while and doing it at a bunch of different places and seeing a bunch of different things, to just provide some ideas and some clarity on what should we be thinking about in maybe these new roles as we're transitioning into new enablement roles. What are the things that if we're in our current roles, obviously the hiring is probably on freeze and budgets are probably cut. So what can we focus on in our current roles, and really just understanding from individuals who are in the trenches doing it today, what is it like and what should we expect? So that's really the goal of this meeting. So I want to start off by just kind of based on what I just mentioned, how do you approach, if you were going into an organization today and you were the first enabler and you were asked to build out a program, how do you go into these leadership meetings and say, look, these are the things that we have to do in enablement to elevate? Like, how do you elevate enablement itself within an organization? And how do you prove to a C-level executive that it is a strategic function and not a support function?
Yeah. I would say, so I think my answers are going to have hopefully a short shelf life because the economy is going to turn around. But
Please,
how I
please.
answer your question right now I'm
Yeah,
going to answer it in the context of the current economy, right? Because if
perfect.
it's, great and things are humming, like totally different
Different.
answer.
Mhm.
I think the first thing before you even talk about what do you say to your C-suite is I think that enablers at the core of who they are as people are such helpers, i.e. problem solvers, that they just jump in and go. They
Mhm.
make themselves support staff and tactical from the beginning. And we have got to stop doing that to ourselves. So like,
So
even
good.
before I answer your question of like, how does Ashley walk in on day one and interact with the CRO? It's my advice to the practice is if you want to be elevated, you have to actually elevate yourself to get
So
that
good.
role. Right.
So good.
And so one of the things that I've been doing is I have been really heads down on upping my business acumen. I have read
Like that.
more sales books, more people management books, more leadership books in 2023 than I probably read the last 5 years combined. And I'm a big reader. Like, I'm an avid reader, but the amount of effort I put into growing as a person when it comes to business is like exponential. And actually, like this topic we're talking about right now, I read, it came out, it was the February 2023 issue of Harvard Business Review. They actually talk about why enablement and other jobs are support functions. And it's how general accounting practices work. So I was listening to somebody the other day say, oh, they're making all these short-sighted cuts. Don't get it twisted. Everybody is aware it's short-sighted. Everybody is aware that it's wrong. Everybody's aware that it could be detrimental or have a negative impact on your employee base.
Yeah.
But the reality is an employee is an asset, which is a fixed cost. So it doesn't matter what you're going to say or do. The books are the books, right? And so educate yourself on how a business even runs. We get really caught up on being an expert in this, an expert in enablement, an expert in customer success, an expert in relationship building, an expert in IT.
Yeah.
That's great. You are going to really struggle elevating yourself and being in the room in a meaningful way if you don't teach yourself all sides of a business. So that's my first, like, to just, like you said, take it on a tangent.
That's really like
my
that.
advice before I even answer anything about what you say to somebody.
I love that. I think that's very good. The leveling up or elevating enablement from like a support function to something different, and that almost requiring yourself to do it, I think is so critical. I think a lot of people, including myself, think, oh, my role should be looked at differently, but I don't do anything to change it. I just hope to God that one day it happens overnight, right? And it's like, that's not the way this works, right? We need to think about ourselves as being more proactive so that we're looked at as more proactive instead of more reactive. Or, something we hear a lot that I hear all the time is, oh, I feel like I've been doing random acts of enablement all the time and not actually implementing my own processes or my own processes or procedures or programs. And I think a lot of it is because we go in and we say, look, I'm just here to help. And they're like, okay, here's a bunch of things you can do. And you're like, that's not what I meant. Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I'm going to, like, this is kind of like a hot take, right? This is like one of Ashley's like hot takes. Like, I'm not a fan of the listening tour. I'm just not. I hear this so much. I see on LinkedIn, someone gets a new job. They're like, I've been listening. And it's like, you probably have been genuinely listening. But you know what you've also been doing? Being an order taker. So yes, good. Should you ask the most successful sales rep how they're doing business? Absolutely. But the sales rep is also telling you, you need to fix this marketing asset. You need to change this slide. You need to do this, this, and this. And so all of a sudden in your mind, you've told yourself, I'm on this great listening tour. I'm going to have all this data. I'm going to be able to set these priorities. But did you, or did you just make a task list? And then did you become a people pleaser by delivering? And then all you've really done is conditioned yourself and the other people that that's what you are, right? So it's coming in. There's nothing wrong with a listening tour to come in and actually hear if what the field is saying matches the corporate or the revenue targets. Because then you're coming into the room of saying, guys, I'm hearing this. People are doing this and you want this. Here's my strategy to get us there. If that's what you're doing on your listening tours and your conversations, cool. If the buck stops at, well, I didn't really get around to strategizing or like redoing the process, but I did deliver a few assets. That, unfortunately, when it is time to make cuts, even though people need those assets, like, again, don't get it wrong, like the sell sheet could be better. They're still just going to use the sell sheet they got because they used it yesterday. What makes you think they're going to not use it tomorrow, right? And so, like, just be very careful of like how you position yourself in the org to make sure that you're giving yourself enough space to have the strategic conversations and find mentors and allies elsewhere in the business. Like, there's a guy on my team I rely on a lot for his financial brain. Like, that is not what I am good at. It's not how I think. I don't understand. But I ask him questions and I learn, right? Like, and that's the only way is like, hey, dumb this down for me. Like, enablers give all the info all the time. Like, be the recipient of the info every once in a while. In other areas of the business, learn about them. Learn what they care about. Learn about the budget. A lot of people in enablement, they say, oh, I'm not the decision maker. I might be able to pick the engagement tool and the enablement platform, but I don't really have a say in anything else. Like, you should. Like, if you're going to use Okta, like, find the IT people. Find what they care about. What do they look for when they procure software? Add those things to your list, right? Make those, to me, enablement should be the ultimate connector. And so when cuts are being made, the more that you have shown you're the connected cog in the wheel, it's more difficult to get rid of you or your team if you're connected and working on all these projects outside of, sales. It's going to make an impact, at least in the first round or maybe even the second round. You can't, third, fourth, it's getting ugly, right? But at least protect insulate yourself a little bit. Yeah, at least insulate yourself a little bit from round 1 or 2.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, I want to talk about the impact peaks. I think it's really important to kind of dig into that, because I think for me, I just said this the other day, I feel like 12 months ago, the messaging and the verbiage and the way that enablers talked about enablement was very different in a bad way than what it is today, which feels much more succinct in a good way, that there is this like commonality and this common ground, and enablement is talking about a lot of the similar things than 12 months ago. It was, I mean, I'm telling you, it was like all over the freaking map. I could talk to 10 enablers 12 months ago and they would have 10 different priorities, 10 different thoughts on enablement. Today, for whatever reason, it feels like this like evolution happening where they're a little more succinct, feels a little bit more on the same page, which I'm loving it. I love it so much. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you go to revenue leaders and say, this is what revenue enablement is supposed to look like, and this is why it's so crucial for a business to have, because this is what we're going to see from doing it correctly?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of contributing factors to that. I don't think it's a simple one answer response.
Yep.
I think a couple of things is that as enablement goes on and on and on, there's more practitioners who understand it. And I think the value props that have articulated what the role is, those success stories are being shared more than ever. And so I think there's just a lot more knowledge out there about it. And I think there's a lot more success stories out there about it now. Like, I think you've got a couple of leaders who get it and they're talking about it in their earnings reports and they're putting it out there, and people are like, oh, that's enablement. Like, I want that kind of enablement. I have this, but like, I want that. Right. And so there's been like a little bit of an educational up-leveling of everybody, if you will. I mean, I don't know, like, I've been in enablement for a while. I don't remember getting the amount of opportunities to speak about enablement 5 years ago as I get today. I mean, there's just a plethora of content out there about our niche, like our market, like what we do, which is fantastic. So I think everybody has just kind of been able to up-level their knowledge of what it is. Some of the perceptions have been broken, which has been helpful. Instead of like lumping them in with training more, people are more willing to give you access to other systems and data. They understand correlating dashboards, and no correlation doesn't always mean causation, but there's clearly something happening. So let's talk about it, right? And so I think that the tools have gotten better to give insights, would probably be the second reason. First is education of everybody. Second is tools. And I think third, in a time like now, where one of the questions is like, when you have to close every deal, what do you do? And it's like, well, you're in trouble. Like, if that's your maniacal focus at the end of every month or year, like, you got to get these three, or we're sunk. Like, I'm sorry to say, you were sunk 6 months ago then. Like, you waited too long. And so I think enablement is able to, the word sales to me has dropped off a lot with the focus of the word revenue. And so with me, what the third thing I'll say has been the injection of client success, of looking at revenue across the board as opposed to a new logo sale. Right now, it's about revenue enablement of what are the playbooks situationally of a new logo, but what is the upsell playbook? What is the expansion playbook? What is the renewal playbook, right? And in an economy like this, that new logo, I think most companies are going to be pretty lax on backing off of this aggressive growth target. But you better believe they want to keep every dollar they've already earned. And so if you are the enablement practitioner and people still might not get it, and you're trying to keep your job, like maybe you feel it coming, and like make yourself sticky. See if like can implementation borrow you? Can you go make the implementation team more productive and focus on implementation and delivery metrics instead of new logo metrics? And so can you actually improve revenue by helping your company deliver more so that you can invoice faster and still get more money this year before it's too late? Instead of saying the sales process is 3% quicker, is the implementation process now 3% quicker, right? And maybe you can focus more on your customer success managers on renewals. Instead of doing a quarterly business review, why don't you do a timely business review? Why don't you find a reason to reach out and tell them this is their adoption and this is their attainment? And if they would only do this much more, and here's how to do it, you get this much more return. If you can get an early renewal, like there's all these incentives that I think enablement, if you're thinking beyond sales, think revenue, think how else does the company make money? Where does that come from? And try and attach yourself there. And like I said, see if a different department can borrow you, right? Or borrow a teammate so that your team's not diminished. And then, in a year from now, when we're recovering, they were still kept on and they're able to come back because now we are maniacally focused on new logo acquisition.
That's really good advice. Yeah, it has been interesting for me in the past 18 months, seeing a lot less sales enablement roles and a lot more revenue enablement roles. And I think it was probably going to happen anyways, but I think the market conditions probably accelerated that change and that evolution. But I think you're right. When we talk about enablement, I don't talk about customer success enablement nearly enough. I don't think. Buyer enablement, candidly, is probably something we should be talking about, right? I mean, can we help our buyers sell internally? Because between you and me, salespeople don't really sell as much as they used to, right? They're project managers more than they're sellers. Our buyers are the ones selling internally at their organizations. Can we enable them? That's an interesting topic, maybe worth exploring. I don't know. But I think you're right. Tying yourself to revenue and not just to sales productivity is probably a really good strategy. Really good strategy. So with that said, because of the market conditions, you're not hiring a bunch of people today, right? Most organizations are seeing a lot out with the old and not a lot in with the new, right? And so how does that change your focus as an enabler, which I think a little bit you just described, which is maybe it's a little less sales focused, a little bit more customer success focused, but also are there certain things that you proactively think about enabling the reps who you do have to drive more revenue out of them, right? To help them be more efficient, to help them be more effective. And what are those things that you like to do just actionably, strategically to do that?
Yeah, the one thing that we didn't do was bog them down with a bunch of training and stuff that they have to watch and look at.
Thank God.
No, we have this, I mean, it's a timely topic because we have the same constraints, right? Like we have the same issues where I am today. And so I know one of the things that the team just did is we cross-collaborated with marketing. We pooled the resources we had and we went and interviewed all of the SMEs for our different SKUs that we sell. We would like to think that we can sell like a full suite, all in enchilada, I guess is a phrase you could say. That's great. Like the budgets don't always match that. The education of the buyer doesn't always match that. Right. Yeah. So what we've done is we've kind of gone back to basics and we've broken down our product into the various SKUs that match the solution set or that outcome that the buyer needs. And we revamped our playbooks and we made them, instead of like full suite solution, we broke them down into the components. And although we use the SMEs to make the training, you know, the how does this work? Why does it matter? Who would you sell it to? All that stuff's in the playbook. But really what I care about and what we implemented was a deal coaching exercise. And it's not meant to say, do this with all of your deals. It's like, what is the deal that you need to close to make it happen for yourself? Or maybe it's a couple. But we've fallen back more on looking at account planning and opportunity coaching to really dig into, are you chasing? Because I get it. A sales rep will chase. And like, I would too, if it was me, because it's my number. And in the economy like this, you don't want to be on the bottom third of any list, right? So don't chase. And so what we gave was a tool to the managers without asking them to be on 8 different meetings about it and having this robust change management plan. It was like on an all call, here it is. We sent it out to them 2 days before the reps. They have the same list of deal coaching questions. And it's like, when you're having your pipeline conversation with your rep, if that is the 2 deals on there that they must close, here's this exercise to run through so that you don't screw it up, because we don't have a bunch of at-bats right now. Right. So we are going to have to focus on what really matters. And so whether it is an expansion, an upsell, a new logo, we gave them an opportunity coaching asset to walk through, because if you're going to lose, you got to lose fast and move on to the next one.
Yeah, so true. I'm curious. I'm finding that this role is becoming increasingly more data driven, which I think is obviously the right direction. I'm also finding that it's becoming increasingly more tied within like RevOps, which I think is also a very good thing. What metrics or KPIs are you looking at to determine a rep's effectiveness? Or is it kind of subjective, or is it very, look, this is the results we're seeing from these reps individually. This is where their gaps are. This is what we need to coach to. Is there something you guys are thinking through that?
Well, here's what I'll say. Like so last summer, think 8-9 months ago, it was a little different. And so when we rolled out our new certification on a new product, we set up all the right dashboards, right? Like we looked at, it was multi-tenant. From our enablement platform, we looked at certification and completion and scoring. We pulled in that data. We also then, in the same dashboard, pulled in from the engagement tool, the personalization and the amount of on-time activity for lead gen. And then we looked at actual opportunity, right? So we had a dashboard that pulled in data from 3 different places to give us this full snapshot of that product. What I'll say right now is, the focus is less on having all these fancy dashboards with sales and just setting them up to close that deal, because we have a bottom line number, right? Like right now, like new revenue is what it is. I don't think right now we're in a position to hone in on increasing average deal size and increasing sales velocity. I don't think the economy is going to allow that to happen. So I think you'd be like kind of treading water and like slowly drowning. So sales kind of letting them go. But like for us, we've shifted into client success. Like I look at dashboards and numbers now recently about who's coming up for renewal. and what could we potentially add on to that renewal is up. So they've got product A and B, but not C, D, or E. And so which is the best one to fit and augment their solution set already to give them a bigger return so that they want to invest with us and also keep our relationship going. And so it's not so much like all these fancy metrics that matter there. It's more of just digging into where are we doing business today and where can we get a little bit more to get us through to the next year.
I love this. So what you're saying is we've identified that the market sucks and that it is very difficult to close new deals. So we're going to spend the majority of our resources and bandwidth on the current customer base and try to expand and retain.
Yeah, like we've even partnered some of our CS group and team. There's actually one of our sales teams that instead of going after new logos, they're actually helping look in our book of business. Yeah, more of an account management model. Yeah.
Wow. That first time I've heard this. I'm candidly, I love it. I think it's a really good move. I think it's really
crazy though. Like those are your clients. Like they're already here. How could you not want to just make that relationship deeper, bigger, faster, stronger? You know, all the things. They're also your references. They're your.
Well, you know why, Ashley? You know why though, right? It's because it's not sexy. It's way sexier to go get the new logo.
I guess. I think it's sexier to win. I don't care what the logo is.
I agree with you. I think increasing the bottom line is great. However you do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like there is an over index of more pipeline, right? And a lot less thought is on the retention and expansion side. You know, I don't know of sales leaders who are incentivized half as much for retention and expansion as they are for net new logos, right? So there's almost
my advice to the sales leader is you probably have fallen back on your laurels and you probably haven't had to, but like my advice to them is where we started, up your business acumen, because you're not going to get your bonus on new logo if no one's going to buy right now in that capacity. You're not going to hit it either. So like when I said enablement needs to get creative and make themselves stickier in other areas of the business, like it's kind of good advice across the board. I mean, you can apply it to whatever situation you're in. You know, if you're a BDR,
that's good.
You know, and you're looking to book meetings not working, like how can we motivate our folks? How can we help? Because, you know, back to what I was reading about, you know, how financing works, you know, with an employee being a fixed cost, everything that a company pumps into that employee, it's on the books immediately right now as a loss. It's not like it's office furniture where it can depreciate and they can parcel out this cost over time. It doesn't work like that. So they're not going to invest a whole bunch of dollars in you right now because one, they don't have it, but even if they did, they're not spending their money and their resource in the right way. And so,
that's so good.
It's just back to like, I think everybody should just really try and up their knowledge of the situation because unfortunately, if cuts are going to happen, you just want to make sure that you have positioned yourself well enough and sticky enough somewhere in the org that become critical, right? Because like I said, decisions, don't get it twisted. They're not short-sighted. They know the impact. They know that the work won't get done and they're okay with that because it's a bottom line decision.
It's very good. Let's talk about that. The lack of new reps coming in, okay, and the focus shifting now to, let's say, doesn't necessarily have to be customer success, but whatever that function is that is going to oversee customer retention and expansion probably is going to be CS, but with some salespeople involved, to your point, you guys have moved kind of a cohort over to account management, which I think is really cool. How do you then turn around and say, okay, for you all, who a lot of you are probably tenured reps who've been here for a little while in the business, you've been focused probably on something a little different than expansion, but we now need to flip to focusing on expansion. How do you get them excited about that, right? Like obviously money plays into that. They're incentivized by it, but like sales reps are incentivized by money and we don't want enablement programs. So like, you know, how do you get them excited? And then also, what are some of the things that you do from a coaching standpoint? You mentioned coaching a moment ago. What are some of the like specific coaching things that you do to level them up? Are you listening to calls? Are you doing you know, like certain sales trainings? Like what are some of the tactical things that you're doing to really help elevate them?
Yeah, well, there's a couple. So you know, in terms of coaching, you know, with all of our playbooks that we did, they all have a practice component, right? And what we did this time, it was new. Like you know, in playbooks of past, we've had multiple practice applications. There's been practice the elevator pitch, get certified, practice the first call deck, get certified. And the first call deck was also listening for like discovery questions and layering questions, right? And then there was practice some anticipated objections. And we did those based on your vertical or industry, right? So it was very like tailored of all of this very, very, you know, 1, 2, 3 step process. With these new playbooks, because the economy is different, the practice application was do the deal coaching first. really debrief your deal first. Who are you going to talk to? What do they care about? Who is their boss? Who connect the dots for me? Is there a customer story you're going to tell? What's the ROI of that customer story? All the things that you'd expect to hear, we have them go through that first. And then the advice on the pitch practice is, which part of that are you not good at? Like self-assess. Where are you weak? Because that's what you should practice. And we're leaving up to the managers who know their teams the most to say, okay, well, we talked it out and you're really good on the why here, but we kind of wavered in this. And so let's practice that piece. And so we built it strategically that way for it to be more open, more, not necessarily like a self-paced feel. I don't quite know the buzzword I'm looking for it, but more of a, you know yourself, where are you weak? Let's up level you. Like that's what you need to practice. And so the scorecard was still there, but it was a little more generic, but it still included all the pieces of, is there a call to action at the end? Did you tell a customer success? Did you check for understanding? All those foundational elements are still there. The topic was just up for grabs so that they could up level in a time where they need to. Because they're not focusing on a bunch of things, right? They're hyper focused on a small book of business and renewals and closing those deals to hit their number.
Yeah, I think the self-assessment piece is critical. I think reps know what they're not good at, even if they don't want to tell you, right? But they know. Yeah. Like I know what I'm not great at, right? And
that's why I don't get too hung up on completion. Like completion's a great metric, but like that makes me feel like I'm a high school teacher again. Like, and it's like, you have to do this because I said so. You're like, I didn't like saying it like 10 years ago. Why would I tell that to a bunch of adults now? But what I think is so valuable about it, and what practitioners need to remember, and enablement practitioners need to remember, is you're giving somebody the space to get better. But they have their own human autonomy. You weren't hired as a babysitter, you were hired as enablement. And here's what's going to help you. If someone chooses not to do that, that's a different conversation. It's usually a different part of the business, right? Like our job in enablement is to say, this is the information we have in front of us. We know from our leadership where we want to go. They have signed up on our plan to get there. Now, when it comes to the participation, you hope that other people doing it shows that, oh, I want to do that too. Oh, if she is successful, I want to be like her. I'm going to do that too. But the other thing that we have to keep in mind is, like you said, reps know themselves, especially ones that have been selling a long time. And so sometimes just asking them that question and making them reflect, they'll probably think it over in their own head. They'll probably be thinking about it in their call planning. Just because they didn't record it for you to see and give them a score and tell them your thoughts about it doesn't mean you didn't do the right thing in helping them get better. And so, you talk about being data-driven. One of the metrics that I am personally kind of weary of, especially in times like this, is 100% of people, 100% of the time, 100% completion, because that's probably not likely. But as long as you're giving them as long as you're asking the right questions to help them self-reflect, think, and assess, if they're taking that to heart and putting it in their account planning and it's working, you can look at them at other metrics, right? You'll see it in their performance, but maybe you could also look at, are they booking more opportunities than before? So you can look at some leading indicators. You can look at dollar amount or meeting booked or some of these, leading pieces of information that are probably more insightful to you and your team and leadership than, 100% of the people did this.
Oh, I have so many thoughts. This is so good. I'm trying to decide where I want to take it.
Wherever. You told me we'd go off the rail, so like
we are. This is good. This is good stuff. So this is interesting. You might find this interesting. I think you might actually like this a lot. So a recent guest I had on this podcast, he talks about, I asked him, how do you incentivize reps to get coaching, to get enablement, right? Because obviously there's the commission check side of it, but like I said, reps know that, but they're not going to do it most of the time. Why is that? That's weird, right? So how do you make it fun? Like, what do you think about when you're thinking about putting these programs together and these processes together? He's a very process-driven enabler, and I really like it. And he said something very interesting to me. He said it's like sports, right? Like an athlete. The best thing an athlete can do is train so much that the game slows down, right? You want the game to slow down. As a rep, if you could do everything just like second nature that is effective and efficient, then you're going to sign up for that training 10 out of 10 times, because you can just rinse and repeat, and basically you're printing money. You're just going to the ATM every time you get on a call. That perspective, I think, is really, really good, right? But most reps don't think about that. So if you can create a culture that reps feel like, oh, coaching isn't something I have to do, right? It's something that if I do, the game will slow down for me, and I will get so good at it that I can almost do it in my sleep. It's like autopilot. I'm printing money. The business is happy because they're making money. I'm happy because I'm making money, and I'm not even really trying, right? That's like the end goal. And I think if you can tap into that, reps would flock to training, I think.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you don't think about that way, right? Reps are thinking, I just want to do what I've always done because I know it, right?
Well, that's because we're humans. Like that is human nature.
It is.
So that's what I said, like we started at the beginning of like, up your education, up your business acumen. Like some of that self-awareness is just growth that we don't give ourselves time for, or we don't think that we're allowed time, because what people don't understand is like doing what you just said is great, but it's not easy.
It's hard.
Like you have to sign up for it's hard work. Like, because you use the sports analogy and it's like, oh yeah, this offense will work wonders for our football team. Like we're gonna win the SEC championship. Yeah. You do have to go out and practice it, and you have to break old bad habits. And right. And so for the game to slow down, for you to know it like the back of your hand, that is a lot of work. And most times we do not invest in ourselves in that way. And so part of it is remembering it is an investment in yourself. You're not investing in the company. Companies will come and go, jobs come and go, coworkers come and go. What you invest in yourself, you take with you. And so I love his approach. I love everything you said about that. But I just think that people need to know that that is not going to just happen. You have to make it happen. And it's a lot of work. And so, yeah, if people when they see it starting to work, they're more inclined to sign up for the next training because they're like, well, shoot, I should have done that a long time ago. But that's okay. Like, don't spin your wheels in that space. But there is an element of the self-awareness piece of, yeah, if you want the deal to slow down and be so good that you know it like the back of your hand, that's a lot more time and effort than I think most people give their job.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So don't give it to your job, give it to yourself. Like I said, don't do it for them, do it for yourself, right? But definitely
so true.
learn everything you can about it.
And I think it goes back to what we talked about, which is it requires a certain level of introspection that and like transparency, which is hard, to identify where are my gaps. And then in a place of vulnerability, come to enablement or whoever and say, look, this is where I'm struggling. I need help. Right. Yeah. And that's where it gets lost, I think.
Yeah. And I know, like, currently where I am, it's one of the first places that I've been where we've actually made a little bit of space for that. There's a couple of different tools that we've used where you essentially take an assessment about yourself. Assessment can be such a dirty word. I almost said test. It's not test, but it's essentially a series of questions that ultimately then tell you who you are. It tells you your strengths and it tells you your weaknesses. And I read mine and I was like, good on me. I'm self-aware. I know these are actually accurate. But I also had people thinking, like, I've never done this before and I didn't know that about me. But then I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, that's me. And then what's cool is once we know who our strengths and weaknesses, or I don't remember all the different things they give you a cool name. They give you a nickname. So it's not strengths and weaknesses. They give you that. Yeah. But what I really like, and one of the managers, the VPs, asked me for from his team again already this year, was it then tells, like, it'll say, Ashley, this is who you are, but this is who Will is. And this is how you two interact. And this is where you're successful. And this is where you're going to be a little offside. So be careful how you speak to Will, because he doesn't like to receive information that way. And you're like, oh, good. Cool. And so you can help people work smarter, not harder. And if you give people time for that introspection of where they're strong, or however you want to think of it already, that helps too. And I think a lot of companies, once again, it goes back to the bottom line of, can companies invest in that? Is it a spend that they're willing to make? But lean on your good vendor partners. A good vendor partner should give you that ROI, and they should tailor that to your company so that when you are going to leadership, and I'm thinking of you now with your post about being a rock star. I made a comment already on it before we got on. But that's part of making your champion. Like you talked about internal selling just a minute ago. Our buyers are the ones doing the selling for us. And so you should be able to service up those assets and collateral to your champion, because selling it internally is really how you're going to get it done too.
The hardest part. It's the hardest part, right?
Yeah, but they're so cool. I'll send you ours. You can take it, and then I'll put you and I against one another.
Yeah, I seriously, like, my mind is, I'm like going like 1,000 miles an hour. I'm like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. My wife was a psychology major, so like she psychoanalyzes
really
every day.
She's gonna
freak out. She will freak out. I haven't had that topic on this show yet either, which is personality differences. That is actually very, very big when you're talking about coaching and training different individuals. It has to be custom. It has to be. Like if you do a broad training for everybody, 10%, 20% of it might be right up their alley. Another 50% of it might kind of be decent. There might be an entire, 30, 40% that's going, dude, I don't know what the hell they're talking about, because they've just tuned out. Right. And it could be personality related. That's a very interesting topic that I don't think it's talked about.
It was funny. I was talking with a woman a few weeks ago. She's a teacher, wants to leave. And so she was talking about, how do I do this career change?
Yeah.
And I also was mentoring a couple of folks who want to be BDRs in the tech space. So I asked them, I was like, how are you going out finding jobs? And they're like, oh, Indeed, and, posted here. And I was like, so what else are you doing? And they're like, oh, okay, great. I said, so let me ask you this. What does a good BDR need to do? What does it mean to be a good BDR? And they rattled off a couple of behaviors that you would absolutely expect to hear, right? Like, being confident, reaching out, persistence. Okay. So you do realize, like, you're the product, right? Like, you're selling yourself. It's a job. And the meeting that you've been trained to book, like, that's called the interview.
Yeah.
So
go get it.
why aren't you doing the BDR job at the companies you want to work for? How are you not maniacally focused on reaching out? Why are you not connecting the dots, reaching out to the team members? How are you not, giving the value prop of what you'll bring to the table? And so the same goes for enablement practitioners. If you're going to roll out your engagement tool and roll out new marketing communications and say, now don't forget to personalize it, how are you going to turn around and have a training program that is not personalized to the role and talking about the individual, right? So, and I'm not saying that we have capacity to make everything great, but if you have your program and you provide the coaching materials, but then you also give the VPs the personality profiles for when they have that coaching conversation, now you are actually encouraging personalization within your programs. So I mean, don't forget to be the job, the same sage advice that you give everyone else. Like, don't forget to do it for yourself and your team.
That's so good. That's so good. I have one more question for you. I knew we would go over, and John, I love it. One more question for you. If you were today going into an organization, let's say you're interviewing at like 10 different places.
Okay.
You're looking for a role. What are things that you would be looking for as potential red flags to avoid in an organization like that? Or what are some, let's call them green lights, that you would be looking for as validation that this is the right organization that I want to work in within enablement?
Yeah, it's funny. So I can't take credit for this comment that I'm about to make, but I was having a conversation yesterday, and the person I was talking to got this piece of advice like within the last month or so. And they said, don't ever work directly for the person who had your job. Because they'll know too much, and there'll be too many assumptions on how it should be done and what it should look like and all these things. And so one of the things I look for is, what is the area of expertise of these leaders? This C-suite or this executive team that you're going to be interfacing with, pending the size of the company. And what is their background and expertise? Because if they're experts in your job, like, walk quickly, run, maybe, I don't know, right?
Yeah, they'll run for sure.
Are you going to be set up to be the expert and like know and own your stuff? Right. And so that was great. Like I said, I cannot take credit for that, but I think it's great. But that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, I would gauge, do they really know what problem they're solving? And have they set themselves up to solve that problem for customers? Because depending upon where they are in that journey, you talk about different flavors of enablement. Enablement can look really shoddy if there is no product to sell. Because if no customers have it, and we're not really sure of the value prop, and pricing's commoditized, and like all these things, probably not really where enablement's going to be needed. You probably will be a training onboarding function, right? Yeah. But when you're going into a company, do they have KPIs? Are they very clear on this is the problem? Are they heads down and investing in the solution? You might be part of that solution, right? Enablement might be a part of that solution. And are you going to have the autonomy and the trust that you're the expert to get that part of the solution done? Like, are you going to be trusted as the face of enablement at your firm? So those two things, like sandwiched together, and like doing both of those from the beginning, I think will really help you weed out maybe the opportunities that you don't want. And then you can look at all the other benefits of the job, like flexibility, your pay, or whatever you value, right? Whatever you want to get out of a job, can you get that from where you're looking?
Sage advice. That is sage advice. Ashley, this was great. Thank you so much. This was, honestly, I think a lot of people are going to get a ton of value from this. I did. I learned a lot from this, candidly. I think this was really, really
fun.
awesome.
I learned from you too. I want to meet whoever had the process, whoever said they just slow down the sale.
Yeah. His podcast it'll release somewhat soon, I'd imagine. His name's Braxton. He's the head of enablement over at User Gyms. Stud. Love the guy. He's awesome. He is very process driven, former seller, comes to enablement with that like seller mentality, where, he wants to have kind of all of the pieces together to present instead of letting people present to him and then him having to go fix it, which I think is such good advice. Like, if you let yourself, you said it earlier, if you let yourself be the order taker, you're going to always be seen as the order taker. So come in with the order, right? And I love it. I think it's so good, and it aligns really, really well. But Let's stay connected. I want to have you on again. I selfishly want to do a series where I have sellers on to talk about what they think about enablement, because I think we're going to get some very interesting responses. And then I also want to have a session or a series where we have both enablement and sales on together, talking about the same topics together. I think it'd be really
like
cool.
the 𝘵𝘃𝗶𝗃 of podcasts is what I think you're saying.
Kind of, yeah. I think so, kind of, yeah.
I watch entertainment value alone.
Exactly. Oh man, Ashley, well, thank you so much. Let's stay in touch. And seriously, I think your advice is going to resonate with so many people, which is exactly why we're here. So thank you again.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, it's tough out there. So like, also stay positive. Like, don't forget that, stay positive, even when it's down. Find someone to pump you up if you're down.
That's right. Give yourself some grace, for sure.
That's right. Absolutely.
I love it.
All right. Well, thank you, Will. So good to meet you.
You too. Thanks, Ashley. Bye.
Bye.